And we're going to get started with recording this webinar at this time. So we used to be known as the Interagency Support Council of Eastern Williamson County. I'm sure we're still known as that, but we recently have. Uh-oh, did I mute myself somehow? Okay, now can you guys hear me? We'll start this all over again. I'm like, why is it asking me to unmute? Yeah. Okay. So we used to be known as the Interagency Support Council of Eastern Williamson County, and I'm sure people still know us only as that, or as just interagency is what we used to go by quite frequently. We have spent some time, our board has deciding that we want to pivot in a different direction, still focused on our core values of why we were created to begin with, but we are now, we have relaunched this summer as My Community Catalyst. So you're going to start seeing communications from us under this new name. So for anybody who might be confused about that, that's why that's happening. And one of our new initiatives that we've launched is our webinar series that we are doing monthly. Now, one of the things I have to do is give a big shout out to our newest employee. Her name is Candace Mees. She's on here with us. And if you can't see her face off to the side, the little corner right there, she just waved. She has been working really hard to organize these and bring these together to make sure that we have the information to share with each of you. Our board members are also on here. I saw Brian Hernandez. Are you on here still, Brian?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for saying hi. If you guys saw him, he is on here. And I don't see Gabriella Westbrook. That is our other board member as well, who's been working really hard on these events to bring for the changes that we have for our organization and bring you guys new initiatives. And I'm trying to think. Nope, I don't see her on here yet, but she might be popping up at some point, and I'll just try to totally put the spotlight on her and make her say hi at that time. In the meantime, what I'd like to do is let you guys kind of have an idea of how our webinars are going to go. We start with just saying, welcome. We're going to do a little icebreaker. And we only do that for a few moments. And then we're going to start talking about any events that you guys might have coming up. And at that point, I'm going to ask you guys to drop in the chat any links or any flyers or anything that you guys have for your organizations. And then we're going to start introducing you to your speaker, which is what we're really here to hear about. And then the speaker is going to present some information that I think is going to be very important for you. So I'm going to just kind of follow this. And then after the speaker presents, there's going to be an opportunity for question and answer. And you'll be able to ask those questions in the chat and also afterwards and ask those questions before we essentially wrap up at 1 o'clock. Now, I am going to let you know that right now I'm in front of my computer. I had to run home and let my dog out today for work. I may be wrapping up at the end from my phone, so I apologize. I'll be driving back to work. And so if that's the case, it might be Candace or Brian assisting with that part. I don't want you guys to think I ditched you on purpose because I promise I didn't. It's just logistics happening here. So just to get started, we are going to get started on our icebreaker. So who introduced you to the work you currently do? Drop those answers into the chat. And I'm thinking about who did this. Now I got to drop something in here. Who introduced me to this? Oh, and I noticed that Brian dropped our new website into the chat, y'all. This is we have a whole new website. So please go visit our website. Do not visit Interagency East anymore. This is our new website with all the new information. I don't see anybody dropping anything in here, so I'm gonna, oh, I see one thing. Oh, oh my goodness. I'm sad about that, but I love that that's the inspiration. for that. That is beautiful. I am going to, let's see, trying to think how to word my answer. Anybody else? Um, let's see. Anybody else have any answers about who introduced them? Oh, I see more now. Oh, wow, you just jumped in. Um, let's see. Perfect. Love that. Thank you guys for participating in that. We like to learn more about the people that are joining us. Now let's talk about any events you have coming up. Do you have any upcoming flyers, like business events or flyers or networking meetings that you want to share with anybody? And when you do that, also please follow us on our social media. One of the things we will do if you do share events with us during our webinars is we want to highlight those on our social media. And we'd like to tag you or your organization in those posts that we make. But to do that, we need to have you connected to us. So if you have an opportunity, make sure you're following us. If there's no upcoming events happening, at all? Nope, it's just because 'cause I'm not in the right chat, you guys, this is what's happening. Promise I'm more tech savvy than this. Oh, I like this. So, we've got a fundraiser. Oh, I like this, and Gerald, I like this so much. And Brian or Candace, can you grab that flyer from the chat?
Got it.
If perfect. And since we're moving ahead of schedule, and other I don't see any other, it might help if I could actually see my chat, that would be helpful. All of a sudden, Zoom has disappeared. Here it is. I don't see any other. Oh, another one, can you grab that information too about Camille's Memory Cafe? Perfect. Oh, I like that. So since we're moving ahead of schedule, I wanna do something a little bit different. I'd like to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves real quick and share just really just a little bit, like a minute of what organization you represent and the work that you guys do really quick. If you think we could get that done. I think there's not that many people here, so I feel like we have enough time for that, and we'd really love to learn more about everybody who's present. Is I could pick on people, or I could ask people to go, if they wanna go, but you know what? I feel like picking on people right now because 'cause I'm in the spotlight and I like sharing the spotlight, so that's what I'm gonna do is pick on people. Um, can I ask, Erica, you've spoken up a few times, do you mind sharing, a little bit about yourself and, um, the work that you do and how you came to be here?
Of course. So I'm Erica. I am the founder and president of the Brooklyn Miller Foundation. We're a nonprofit organization that helps bring smiles to kids battling cancer.
Oh,
My daughter passed away a little over a year and a half ago after we only knew she had cancer for 3 months before she passed away. Um, but she made me promise to start a nonprofit to help other kids because she didn't want them to have to suffer the way she did. So that's what I did. I have no clue what I'm doing most of the time, but I'm doing it.
I love that, Erica. I would love to connect with you more in the future. We do a podcast where we highlight a local nonprofit. I would love to talk about your story and the work that you're doing. But I just, that is, it's just a terrible journey that has led you here, but I will say that it's such an inspiration that you've turned that journey into an opportunity to give to other people and to help other children. And I just think it's beautiful. So thank you for doing that. Thank you. Yeah. And now I'm going to pick on Lauren Welch. Can you share a little bit?
Yeah, hi, Lauren Welch. I heard about today through Ray. I feel like I heard a lot of things through Ray. Erica's shaking her head as well. We just moved into the area. My family and I just moved into the area in December. So, area being we live kind of Bertram. So, area not, I mean, anyway.
No, I
Um,
love that.
yeah. And so I got connected to Ray, who connected me to all the things like Ray does. And I own a grant writing, like a grant consulting firm, and work with some nonprofits all over the place, including since I've been here, a few that I've picked up in the last 6 months here in the Austin area.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. I own some property in Bertram. We're building our house. We're going to retire out there, actually, of all places. So I love that.
Well, that's what we did. We bought 5 acres 7 years ago, before my husband retired, and then sat on it for a while until he retired. And now he's a school teacher.
Nice. You retired to become a school teacher. I love that.
Retired from the military, yeah, to become a school teacher.
Oh, that's got to be probably very rewarding.
Yesterday, not to take yesterday, he came home and I said, "How was today?" He goes, "I only made one kid cry." So he was excited that it was just one.
I love that. I don't see the name, but I see a gift of time at Georgetown.
That's me. Hi, I'm Becky Fultome. Um, I am the ED of a small nonprofit called A Gift of Time. We're located here in Georgetown. We help families who are living with dementia, mild to moderate. And so um, we help them by providing respite programming 5 days a week. We have Camille's Memory Cafe that you mentioned. That's for families to attend with their loved ones together. It's usually a concert of some sort. It's just really amazing to see people who can't really, they don't know who I am or, what day it is, or maybe can't even hold it, carry on a regular conversation with you. But once songs come on, they know the words to them and they'll sing or hum along, and it's really fascinating. So we provide things for families to be able to get some rest and recharge, and provide them education so they feel comfortable and confident with providing care to their loved one in the home. And so that helps it prolong, the most times inevitable hard decision of placing somebody in a memory care facility. They're very, very expensive, and folks, want to stay at home longer. So we enabled them to do that. We partner with several other nonprofits in town, like Rock. We're going to be visiting them
Ooh,
again in September. And we're going to be starting a new program called the Brain Boost Center and it's for people who have mild cognitive impairment. So we're finding out more and more that people are being diagnosed earlier. And so we want to be able to connect with them earlier so they could take advantage of our programming for a lot longer, and do all the things that the doctors and, Alzheimer's Association tell you you're supposed to be doing, socializing, doing brain boost things, arts and crafts, and all those kinds of things. So we are located over at the Carver Center for Families over by the hospital and by the post office. So thanks for allowing me a chance to tell you guys about us.
thank you. Oh, this is such good. I'm writing notes. I probably don't need to since it's being recorded, but this is all such good information. Courtney Clark, I'm gonna call on you next.
Hi, I am a facilitator with the Georgetown Nonprofit Group, which I think most people know as Ray's group. So I also heard about this from Ray. So happy to be here. We're working to build sustainable community for nonprofits and nonprofit professionals around the Georgetown area.
I love that. This is great information. I think last one to call on is Michaelina, and I don't see the whole Armulowitz. Armulowitz?
Hi guys, me Carlina. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Great to be here. Good morning, everybody. I am the executive director of Mosaic Advocacy. We are a brand new nonprofit. We haven't even hit a year yet. We work with parents whose kiddos are placed in foster care. So these are bio parents, not foster parents. These are the biological parents of the kiddos who have been placed in foster care. Our reunification rate in Texas is 25%. So that means that of all the kiddos that go into foster care, only a quarter of them return back home to their biological caretakers. And a big part of that is really the lack of wraparound support for these parents. So we walk alongside these parents, help connect them to the community, find resources, help them rebuild homes so that it's safe and healthy for these kiddos to come back to, in hopes of changing these reunification numbers and getting more kids home.
Wow. This is you guys, please expect that you might see an email from me asking to like interview you for a podcast, all of you guys. This is first of all, thank you, Ray, for inviting such an array of people. I should not be surprised by this at all, but thank you so much. This is such beautiful. You have no idea how excited I am. Before I continue though, I want to get Brian a chance to share a little bit more about himself, and the work he does do outside of being a board member here.
Hi, all. Yeah, I'm Brian Hernandez. I am a board member here. I'm also a board member with another organization called Ladders for Leaders in the community as well. But yeah, I worked for quite a number of years as a journalist, and then I moved into helping workforce development boards, really getting their stories out. And I was able to really start up kind of a consulting or an agency firm that really helps with storytelling and really helping organizations, nonprofits, really, be able to control their narrative even more than they're already doing. And the idea being that then you can create campaigns around that narrative for the different audiences you're trying to reach, and really kind of tailor those to the actions you want those audiences to take, right? So I'm happy to help out and offer any advice and any assistance I can and really getting your story out there, especially some of the newer nonprofits as well. But more importantly, connecting you with as many other nonprofits as possible. And that's really what our mission is here, with my community catalyst is to really help you with your storytelling, so that you can really create as much impact as possible and really achieve the vision that you have for yourselves. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you.
Thank you. I am hoping that Candace doesn't like poke me in the eyeball later when she sees me because I'm about to put her in the spotlight. Candace, can you share a little bit about yourself and the work you do?
Sure. My name is Candace, and I've been with my community catalyst for a few months, maybe since April or so. I've before doing work with nonprofits, I was a stay-at-home mom for 15 years. And then I have a friend that runs a different nonprofit, and she asked if I would be willing to help her with some behind the scenes stuff. So I did it, of course. And then she introduced me to Liz. So I just kind of help behind the scenes, and with administrative organizational stuff, and these webinars. Yeah, that's me.
She does an amazing job. We are so grateful, and I am so grateful for that introduction always because she makes all of our board life so much better and easier. So thank you for being here, Candace. I guess I have a few more minutes, so I will share a little bit about me real quick, and then we're gonna jump into our speaker. I will share that. So I am the director of the anti-human trafficking team with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. I'm an attorney. I used to prosecute in Williamson County, actually criminal prosecutions. Then I went into a defense for a little while. Then I did some work with statewide mental health laws, basically kind of policy work and doing technical assistance statewide with that with courts. And then I've also worked with victims of stalking, domestic violence, trafficking, and sex assault through the Texas Advocacy Project, which is a statewide nonprofit that provides legal services to victims. And I have a whole career from before being a lawyer. I went to law a little bit later in life. I have 6 kids and a couple of grandbabies, and I'm super busy. I also serve on another board where I'm the communications director for the Texas Association of Specialty Courts, which is actually a statewide nonprofit as well that works to help promote those specialty courts that serve people who have addiction or mental health challenges that are basically connecting them into the justice system, whether it's family courts or criminal courts or anything like that. And then also, I'm also on the statewide task force, the governor's sexual assault survivor task force, where we help improve the criminal justice system's response to victims of sexual assault crimes. And so sometimes I get a little busy, and that is mostly about me. And I keep you here all day just talking because I am much of a talker. So what I want to do now is jump in to talk about Ray. And I need to do it this way. I'm going to share this. Can you guys see the screen again? Nope.
Yes.
Yes. Is it showing Ray?
Yeah, and handsome
Okay.
face.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, I have too many monitors. So I'm not going to read this because anybody can read this while I'm talking. Instead, I want to tell you about how I met Ray. So I actually met Ray when I was just every so often when I would attend the interagency monthly meetings that we would have, the networking meetings over at the church in Taylor. I think I might have met him at one point during one of those meetings. I don't even recall, but I'd heard about him. And ultimately, I kept hearing about him and that he would make a good coordinator for our basically our board retreat, and that he would be great at facilitating that. So I asked him if he would join us for that, and he did such a great job helping our team reimagine the direction we were going in and really be brave to proceed in this new direction. So, a lot of what we're doing now has a lot to do with Ray's contributions and facilitating our team and pulling out from our team all the ideas and the heart that we have for this work. So, and then I've gotten to know him just a tiny bit more beyond that, not as much as I would like to, because again, I've been way more busy than I would like to be, because honestly, I think I'd like to just hang out with Ray a lot. I feel like he's full of knowledge. He has just this presence about him. And I think that he would have a lot to teach me about leadership and about running a nonprofit, about all of that stuff. So I'm very excited that he agreed to speak on one of our webinars, and today's specifically our topic. And I really hope that everybody enjoys the presentation that he's going to provide us today. So I am going to stop sharing right there. Yes, he is so wonderful. So I hope I've embarrassed him enough, because I feel like that's just, proper etiquette is to embarrass the person that you are presenting, and go from there. But I would like to let Ray jump on and get started with his presentation now, Ray.
Well, thanks, Liz, for that. Yes, embarrassing. No one likes to be talked about, and I especially am one of those kinds of people. This is going to be a little interactive, so I am trying to make sure I grab the chat as well. So not as much as the people, but thanks for that great introduction. It's so interesting. I have worked in the nonprofit space for Georgetown for the last 10 years. And with the nonprofit group in Georgetown, we've been assembled for 5 years, actually started during COVID. And I did all the presentations at the beginning of our inception and then kind of became just a full-time facilitator and haven't done very many of the presentations. I've invited people to do those presentations, but haven't done many myself because I usually do these things live. But so I was so grateful when you guys asked me to do this because I have the opportunity to present this content. I'm super excited about this. So you guys can see my screen. Hopefully you see Data Driven Nonprofit up there. Is that correct? Thumbs up? Okay, good deal. So I'm really excited to get into talking about mission-driven organizations that do an effective job of measuring their outcomes and their outputs. So this is what kind of inspired me to talk about being data-driven versus other ways, and especially in the climate of having quite a bit of funding issues right now that we haven't seen before. So in this presentation, what I hope to do is define the metrics that you need to track for impact, use the data for better decision-making, communicate success to funders, boards, and stakeholders, and create a culture of data-driven leadership. And this background for me comes from when I was the principal of several schools. The first year you become the principal, there's a school accountability rating. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is to see not only how we measured last year, but how could we measure ourselves as we move to the future. So in other words, you have where you are currently, where do you want to be in the future, and then how does the process go to get to there. And what I found at most of those schools is they were measuring the wrong things. They did a really great job at what we called the autopsy measurement. In other words, they would measure well after the fact, like failure rate, attendance rate, but we didn't have very many metrics of how well were we growing, how well were we progressing. And then at the bottom line, we found out that we weren't even measuring the right outcomes. And so, for example, one of the things we were measuring was if you're trying to figure out like reading scores, for example, and you want a grade level to move on reading scores, one of the things that moves grade level on reading scores is to go back and look at the data and say, okay, what exactly is happening in here? And if you see that the female students are actually performing better than the males, and we know research tells us that, and we know that fluency can be a problem with the males reading scores, then to simply have them checking out more library books isn't really going to move the needle on the reading scores. So then knowing that information, it really helped us to see how we could move that later. Well, that works with all your nonprofits, and some of the examples I'll use today will be maybe food pantries, literacy in the community, and how making the accurate measurement on the back end, what you really should be measuring, and then how do you move from that current state to future state, which is really, really super important. So the problem is with nonprofits, they generally collect data, and you guys are data rich, but you struggle to use it effectively. I bet you collect data all the time. So I'm going to ask you a little quick question. Do you feel like your organization is data driven? So in the chat, if you would just answer yes, no, maybe, or just why, Y, N, or M. Let's see how many of you feel like you're data driven. Go ahead, take a minute to do that. So we got a no, a yes, participation. I'll talk to that in a little bit. What else do we have in there? Anybody else? And you guys that are on the board at Catalyst Collective, you have goals and strategic planning. I know you have some things. A K for kind of. I like that. So does anybody have a last thing that they want to talk about on being data driven? So let's go to maybe Erica. Do you want to tell us a little bit? I mean, that feels definitive. It was a lowercase no, but tell us, unmute and tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, we are still very new, about a year and a half old. And as I said earlier, I just jumped right in. I am learning there's a lot of things that I should be keeping track of, and I'm not. So I don't have any kind of data for anything right now. So it's a very definitive no.
Yeah, true. Hopefully when we get through, maybe you'll have some idea of things you can track. Becky, do you want to tell us a little bit about the yes side and some of the things that you track? It might be really useful and helpful to Erica.
Sure. We track volunteer hours because we do a lot of, with one of our grants, we have to be able to document in-kind hours or staff hours, which would be volunteer hours. Also participation in all of our programming. So the number of hours that families receive respite programming, so the hours that they can spend time taking care of themselves, going to doctor's appointments, visiting with friends, and then also the hours that their loved ones spend with us enjoying our activities. So most of everything we do has to do with, participation in our education events and things like that. So we'd like to track those numbers.
Yeah, those sound excellent. I mean, those, and so one of the things that Becky does is useful, would be useful to Erica. Like, it's one of the things I tell people is, well, look at what you do and what can you count. That's a great start. And what Becky's saying is they found places that they can count things. Attendance, participation, those are great starts. So let's talk about one of the reasons why nonprofits struggle to use data well. And here are some of the reasons that I came up with is they don't, perhaps you don't have a clear purpose for the data. Like, why are we using this data? What will this data do for us? And then to what purpose will we use it later? One of the things Becky said is one of the grants that she's applied for is directly tied to the data that she collects. And that's an awesome reason to use the data and to collect it. Not enough time or know-how. And this comes up a lot because some people say, well, I could write those things down or I could track those, but I don't know if I have enough time to do that. And I don't even know if I have the know-how of what we're collecting. I had a thrift store that was collecting sales data, which you would anticipate a thrift store to do, collect how much profit they were making, because everything that was donated is free. So everything going out the door is for a profit. So they could collect data on that pretty easy at what they call point of sales. One of the things they weren't collecting was point of donation data. And what we found, we were working with a consultant, and he taught us this, that at the point of collection is the most important data, because then it comes into pricing on the other end, and then it comes into how long did it sit on the floor. And all that data is important to how much do you turn over the inventory, and the turnover of inventory happens to be the thing that drives up sales. That was super interesting, and I'm a data geek, so that made sense to me, and so that's one of the things that that's one of those. I don't know if I have enough time, but do you have enough time? In their case, did they have enough time not to increase their profit? And that was the question that the consultant had given us. Number 3, data is scattered and messy. So it's hard sometimes when you're in a large organization and you have multiple places that you have to go grab the data. I can tell you one of the data things that I have to record for my own self is mileage. It's a business data point that is important. But I mean, really, after I've done a whole week's worth of work and maybe a month or so, that is in the evening, do I really want to sit down and type in my mileage? But it's important. So you have to make time for it. You have to go find it, and you have to put it in a system that works for you. The other thing is outdated tools or system. Sometimes there's newer ways to do collection of data that didn't exist before. I'll give you an example for my son. His company moved into a opportunity where they would supplement an employee's transportation if the employee paid for half of the vehicle. But one of the things they have to use is a data log. Well, that would be not as advantageous if they had to write it down every time, but the log actually is a phone app. And so when he hops into the truck, all he does is he presses the phone app that says, record this data. And then when he's reaches his destination, he hits the app again. So are there systems out there that can help make collecting data a little bit easier? So a quick poll, and I just want you to put in the chat A, B, C, or D. A little bit about collecting data. We collect it, but we're not sure why. That's A. The staff are busy and not always trained in how to work with data, B. C, it's hard to find the information when we need it. And D, we don't have the right setup to make the data work for us. And it could be all of the above, or it could be a combination. Can you put that in the chat? Anyone else have a thought, an idea? Yeah, it looks like, now that I read it, but more intensely, I'm like, oh, okay. All right. So we have several of you that put B down. Staff are always busy, and are not always trained in how to work with data. So can someone kind of comment on that? What that feels like? What does busy feel like? And how could we train our staff?
I guess I'll say something. My staff is volunteer me. And so I'm out trying to do everything, and so far behind on everything. And since I don't know how to do almost anything, it's hard to train on something I don't know.
Yeah, you don't even know.
Yeah.
You don't even know what you don't know to know if you're doing it if there's a better way to do it. Would that be a way of saying it?
That's a great way of saying it.
Yeah.
I'll go, Ray.
Yeah.
So it's me too. Well, I've got a couple of other part-time folks, but I'm the one that generally keeps up with the data. But I wish I'd kind of started with a better program early on, because as we've grown, and I'm like, oh wow, this is really good cumulative information. And so now I'm having to go back, like for volunteer hours and for participant hours, I'm having to go back and literally input information off of our sign-in sheets into a program. It's called One Tap. And so it's basically an attendance tracker where you could just literally have folks, now they can just come in and just tap on a thing and it's automatically recorded. But, every grant or every grant report has a different reporting period and they want different information. And so I'm like, okay, well, I have from here to here. Okay, but this one needs from here to here. And so then I have to go back and pull up all my sheets and add everything up again. And so now I'm kind of trying to compile everything to where it's in this one program to where I can run reports that are specific to dates. So.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, Becky. The archived data has to be transcribed digitally so that it can be useful. So that's one big point. And then it's how do I catch up with that? Especially if you're going from, and the digital space moves so quickly. Like maybe this was a good idea to track data back in the day, but now how do I do that today? I can tell you that some AI products do actually do that. If you scan it in and you drop it into those products, ask it to give you some kind of quantification data. It probably can do that for you in a much faster pace than in the old days. You might have had to get a volunteer that was willing to write all those things down and see what you're doing. The second thing I think is really interesting that Becky brought up is the One Tap. So you have a volunteer group that you have to train to use technology. And sometimes that seems intuitive, but in other ways, that's not as easy as it always seems. And especially if you have revolving volunteers that come in and out of your system. So in some of the larger, I would say the larger food pantry organizations may have a corporate group that comes through that wants to volunteer, and they have to be able to track that data as well. So that means you have to train a new group of people that are coming in that probably won't come back for another year. So all of those systems in place are really really super important to try to figure out. Some of you put C down. It's hard to find the information when you need it. Tell me maybe what's some thoughts there.
Well, for me, because I am so busy out trying to do everything, the stuff that I do have is not in any way, shape, or form organized, or like I can't find it if I need it. Especially if it's something when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, okay, I really need to do this. I need to find this now. I can almost guarantee you I'm not going to find it now because it is not organized.
Yeah, it's really hard because you're just you have multiple stacks and you're just deciding, where did I put that and what did I file it under? I worked with an organization that it was a large nonprofit, and they had been keeping digital files for every job position. So they were going, it was on a universal drive. Everyone could look at these files, but some of those files were from departments before they consolidated, and then after they consolidated, when a person was there, when a person left. So what they found is, think of a storage closet or your garage where you keep pushing things in, but you don't really have an organization opportunity there, and you don't have a way of pulling things out. And they ended up having to go and find assistance through, actually, the University of Texas had a student group that was willing to take on the project. And in the project, it was to say, how can we digitally organize all of these files? I had thousands of documents that needed to be organized into some kind of system that would be useful as they move forward. So that is a very true statement there. And then let's go to D. We don't have the right setup to make the data work for us. Liz, I think you had commented on that too.
I did. I commented on that. Basically, I kind of read that a couple different ways, but one, I'm just thinking at the end of the day, the right setup is the one that works for you, right? The one that's going to work for your system, your circumstances. And so it kind of feels like all the answers kind of come back to D, right? Because if you have it set up properly, it's going to work for whatever's going on, whether how you collect it, where you collect it at, and if it and how easy it is to access it from wherever you collect it at if you have the right setup created. So I was kind of thinking about that too. I was like, oh well, if I just address D, then that solves all the rest of the problems. At least that's the way I was interpreting that.
That's a good point. And I think what a good point that Liz is getting at is if I do some work on the front end before I start working on data collection, but if I can do a proactive strategy on the front end, and a good friend of mine said, if you were going to go to your garage and clean it out, you would probably start with a plan. And through that plan, you would have different decision points with that plan. You know, are you going to pull everything out of the garage at the beginning and then put back what you want? And then do you know the criteria to which things go back into the garage and things get left out? And so because of that plan is actually really important when you add strategy, what you're trying to do strategically, and then what you're trying to collect, it's good to know how do we deal with that plan at the beginning. So let's talk about some of those tips. So measuring what matters is pretty much one of the most important things to think about. So what should nonprofits measure? And we find this happens a lot. I use sports analogies because I coached and I coached track, basketball and football. And so it was real easy for me to get data because we were always collecting numbers all the time. And especially at the performance level, we collected numbers. We rarely collected numbers at the practice level, which people are starting to understand that if you collected numbers in the practice level, you could predict the outputs at the performance levels. So that was pretty easy for us to do those collections. When I worked for a behavioral health hospital, we had the same kind of collection. I was doing business development. So in our business development funnel, we had to take all of the work that we did to make people aware of their behavioral health conditions as well as our resources and decide if we were going to be a good fit for them. And then they would actually show up and go through intake. And that's what we call a conversion. So we had to have X amount of touch points to get to the opportunity for a conversion. But even at the conversion, once they entered the hospital, we had to take data points there because it was important that through going through the treatment protocol, that as they discharged from the hospital, that they felt like there was a benefit of coming into the hospital anyway. And that's the same thing you guys are doing with your nonprofits. So the input metrics are usually the resources that you have at hand, and that can be budgetary and it can be static resources as well. In other words, do you have a building? Do you have computers? What are your needs as far as resources go. And then funding, obviously, not only your internal budget, but then your external funding to keep the programs and the projects moving. So those are all easily tracked. And then the staff, which includes your volunteers. So the input's usually the easiest thing for us to write down and to measure. The output metrics are a little bit of those attendance kinds of things. So the output metrics are the services you delivered and the events held. So I used to tell my teachers, just because you teach it doesn't mean the child learned it. And so that was a really important paradigm shift, because in the schools where if we gave them the best resources in the classroom and had the right kind of funding mechanism behind there and got the most highly trained staff to teach a kiddo in maybe language arts or something like that, and we're measuring reading performance scores, then the output metrics were how many lessons were taught, and then also what was the students' attendance and being there. It may have some translation to actually an outcome and an impact, but sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then where do you go from there? So let's look at those outcome metrics and those impact metrics. So the outcome metrics is a behavioral change. Did something about them change? And Becky, you said something that really caught my eye. You said when we measure their attendance at our event and the joy it brought them. And when you said joy it brought them, I was like, hallelujah, that's an outcome metric right there. That was super huge. And then the other is the short-term effect. And you had mentioned that as well, that as for the caregiver to have a little respite in their life. So those are huge. And so when you're thinking of outcome metrics, you're talking about what's that behavioral change. So, and then what are those short-term effects? And then what are the impact metrics? In other words, how does this impact the community at large? And what are those long-term effects? And so when we're setting up our strategic plan and what we measure within the strategic plan, those metrics are really key pieces. And I'll put in the chat in a little bit the way I do this is with a logic model, and I'll put that a logic model document in the chat that you can go to and pull down, and that'll really help you with input metrics, output metrics, outcome metrics, and impact metrics. Do you have any questions about that? Because that can be kind of a tricky place to live.
Hey, Ray, I just wanted to kind of mention, it just occurred to me, I had never done any kind of grant writing or anything like running the nonprofit. I'd worked in nonprofit as an ED, but I wasn't actually, in charge of like the whole organization. And so it wasn't until I started writing grants that I started realizing the difference between outputs and outcomes and all those kinds of things. So if anybody hasn't really done that, once you start doing it, it helps you kind of learn what you need to be tracking, because they're going to not only ask for it to begin with the grant, they're going to want to know in the reporting also. And so that's kind of how I learned about the differences between the things and what, oh my gosh, yeah, I need to really be tracking this stuff, because they want to know how many people you serve. They want to know how many unique individuals. They want to know all these things. And so that's basically how I learned how to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to do it. I can tell you with our literacy programs, what we did, our resources were, we had a reading fluency program that we used by our instead of reading on grade level, we had the kiddos read 2 grade levels behind, but we had them actively reading more the more time they read, the faster their fluency rates would grow. And if they read a little bit below grade level, they had a better chance of reading faster and finding content that they enjoyed. And so we bolstered joy into it as an incentive factor. And then we had a reading program where they did track the number of books they read, but we put a timing component on it. So it wasn't just the number of books you read, but it was the number of books you read in a month. And then we could incentivize that. And we did that. We had to have that as our input metrics. And then what we found some of the things that we found is, the kiddos that participated in that, but we also had to do some grade level reading tracking, and then they would take those benchmarks each month, and they would actually, one of the biggest incentives is when they saw their reading level go up. And then we would celebrate those kiddos who really kind of hit the benchmark and also saw the reading level go up, because then they had a behavioral change because they were reading more books, they were reading faster. And it's a little bit like in athletics. If you want someone to run fast, you have to teach them how to run fast. And that was because you have to teach the body to do that. And we were doing the same thing with the reading level. So it is important to be able to think about all those things when you're writing grants. That is just incredibly true. So choosing the right metrics, just going to Becky's point, is kind of the key piece. And in doing so, you have to think about this. Does it align with my mission goals? So is this part of what we do and what we're trying to achieve? Is it focused on the outcomes instead of the activities? And does it consider stakeholders' expectations? So here's a place, I'll use my food providers as an example here. And a lot of times when you're looking at your mission, and the two areas, and Becky's group with the people that are experiencing the effects of Alzheimer's and long-term dementia and acute dementia, the end results is not that you're going to cure the disease, but you're going to improve a better quality of life. Well, my hunger people sometimes get caught up into this because they might put their mission as we are going to try, or at least their vision is that we're going to try to end hunger in Williamson County. And that's a really lofty goal, but we're not really sure why hunger exists. Okay, it could exist because there's a lack of food, but it could exist like for my 29-year-old who decides he doesn't want to cook. So we're not really sure why hunger exists, and we're not even sure that it's a solvable opportunity. So one of the things when you're doing the mission alignment, so like if you're giving away, let's say, an 18-wheeler amount of food per month to people who qualify for your services or people who don't, then you have to align the mission to say, we're trying to increase access, or we're trying to give them better opportunities for what they can do financially. I have one friend that says we're giving them $300 worth of food so that they can use that $300 somewhere else in their financial needs. So sometimes if it doesn't align with the mission, I always say, well, go back and look at your vision and mission and see if you're even achieving what exactly it is that you want to achieve. Focusing on the outcomes instead of the activities, because this is a great place to think about in fundraising. Is a lot of people talk about like the gala fatigue. I don't know if you know what that means, but it's like when you hold this huge event that takes a lot of volunteer hours and a lot of volunteer time. And it turns out that your staff loses energy and it kind of burns them out, and the profit margin's pretty low. And so you have to really kind of think about that. Like, is this outcome worth the activities that we're doing? And are those things aligned? Are we getting the outcome that we wanted to achieve? And then the third thing, does it consider the stakeholders' expectations? So that goes back to what did the stakeholder really wanting to get as a result of participating with your organization? Like, you may give it some qualifying effects, but on the other end, and you guys know this from reviews, and I know when I was at the hospital, one of the things that we had to look at is how people gave us Google reviews and Facebook reviews and so on and so forth, because that was important, because did what we say on the front end align what they got at the back end, and how can we make an adjustment based on those expectations? So I would ask that question to you guys, and I know a couple of you are trying to bring some affective goals to families. How do you measure the stakeholder expectation on the backside? Like, Erica, I know with your group, you're giving them things to create comfort and those kinds of things. But how do you measure that on the backside? Like, how do you know it's actually achieving what you're set out to do?
How do I know? I have quite a few parents that will email me and send me pictures or text me, tell me thank you and how much it meant to the kids.
Yeah. That's really good, isn't it? And Becky probably would say that's really good grant material. You know, it's Becky. Do you do some similar things like that as well?
We do, yeah. Well, you just talked about the Google reviews, and so if you go to our Google site, you'll see, I think we have 24 Google reviews. Are all 5 stars. So what I did was I made it easier for our family. So I just sent them an email and just said, hey, you're always telling us how great of a job we're doing. It'd be really excellent if you could just stop by for a second and give us a 5-star review and tell them a little bit about, what you enjoy about our program. Because with the SEOs, or I'm talking out like I know what I'm talking about, but
yeah, no, I know.
The more that interactive they are, and more specific they are, the better it is. So I just asked them, hey, if you can do this, it'll help other families know more specifically what we do and kind of get the word out. And so, I mean, they just stepped up and did it, just from my asking. And you can just put a little link there, so it takes them right to it. So I've done that a couple times. So that kind of helps, and so I'm able to kind of use that as testimonials too. But yeah, it's kind of hard to kind of quantify it other than what they tell you. So that's kind of, we're going to start working with, I don't know if you know Dorinda, Rita Linda. Can't forget what her last name is, but anyway, so she's kind of a researcher, and so as we're starting one of our new programs, she's going to help us build some kind of quantifiable measurements that we can measure quality of life, just to kind of start out with that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it is proven, if you go to the Alzheimer's Association and respite programs and things like that, and really they have proven, or whatever the metrics they use, that it actually does help.
Yeah, and so you're going to probably have some kind of survey. You're going to have input from them, and then the output from the kinds of things that happen. Right. I think Becky also hits on a really great thing is when you're deciding to launch a program, it is really important to choose the right metrics before you launch. You don't want to skew the metrics to prove the program worked when it didn't really show the success that you really wanted it to. So pick those metrics ahead of time, see how it plays out, and you'll see that some people like to test a program before they go all in on a program. So it's,
I kind of learned that the hard way in a little bit. As an example, I was trying to find something to measure the family's burden level. And so part of the thing, when I knew that I was writing a grant and I knew I was going to have to measure, they ask you how you're going to find out if it works or not. So I told them I was going to start using this Zarit burden scale, ZARIT. And so we were doing that. We were giving it to the families, ahead of time when they first started the program. Then I'd get into a year of it and I was like, oh, rats, didn't ask them again to see if the numbers went down. And then somebody, yeah, so of course, in a year's period of time, their loved one is going to, decline. And so that burden's going to go higher anyway. And so it's like, is that really going to be a good measurement of where, so it wasn't really that good. So I kind of had to backtrack in one of my reports and just say, hey, we thought this was going to work, but as a good measurement, but it just kind of proved that it wasn't really telling us anything.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Sometimes it happens when we're trying to scale something. So you have disease progression causes a decline anyway. So it's hard to pre and post test that measurement. Sometimes, like I have some of my food people, they are the dramatic increase in population changes the numbers anyway. So it's hard for them to do a year over year like that as well. So here's something that would be good. And like I was saying, I'll put in the chat. I have a logic model. Let me see if I can grab that real quick link. And I'll just put that in the chat so that you guys can hopefully this will work. Yeah, there you go. And it's just, all it is it's kind of a logic model starter guide. And it really helps you from the beginning of kind of thinking about everything we're talking about today, and gives you kind of those questions, and it doesn't cover the whole metric journey, but it does cover a lot to get you on the right start. But one of the things I tell people is to just find 3 to 5 key metrics that best reflect their organization's impact. What a lot of people do is they'll either have one metric or too many metrics. So for example, let me give you this. If you were doing metrics on being healthy for yourself, like this is a New Year's resolution. I want to be healthier. Tell me in the chat real quick, what would be 2 or 3 key metrics of being healthy? So we have weight, measurements, blood pressure. What else? What are other things? Being healthy. Or becoming healthy, I guess. What would be some more? Number of times exercising, activity levels, food choices, resting heart rate, hours of sleep, exercise, steps. All of those. And plus it might even be doctor's visit. So one of the things that I'm a health educator, and so one of the things I always encourage people, especially at my age, is I tell them it's to hit all your visits. So teeth, eyes, if that's an issue, primary care and any specialty care, and to continue doing those things so that you can get a health profile. And so what you're talking about is a really good way to select those metrics. But if you picked one metric, does it actually tell you that you're gonna automatically be healthy? So one of the things people do at the beginning of the new year and it's probably because they pull in a lot more calories than they need, is they'll say, I'm going to try to lose weight. And I'm going to use that as my measurement. But being that that's only one measure, it could be problematic to those other measures that are out there. Does that sort of make sense? Give me kind of a thumbs up if that makes sense. You could pick that one thing, and yeah. So that's one of the things to kind of think about what your organization is. What would, if I was asking those questions about my own organization or a program in my organization, what would be those 3 to 5 things that are the most important? But even don't go, if it's a brand new program, probably 3 is your threshold there. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to pull other data, you're just trying to hit these 3 things to say it's going to be successful and it should move forward. It's called go, no go. So does it go or does it a no go, and you stop and reverse course. So that's important. We talked about collecting and managing data and simple ways to collect and store data without overwhelming the staff. You can use apps. You can do existing. There's volunteer check-ins. Here's what I would tell you. Even if you just put a QR code on a poster where the volunteer sign-in is, and they scan the QR code, and then they check themselves in, that's just going to make it a little bit easier, and you could do it on a Google form. So I'm trying to give you the low cost ways to do that. That's just an easy way to kind of get started and to do that. And at least you'll have that kind of data just sitting in there. Make sure that you're also gathering your internal and your external data sources. If you're dependent on website traffic, you're going to want to be able to pull data on that. And if you're also dependent on social media traffic, you're going to want to pull data on that as well. And something else that people forget is inquiry data. And so when someone is, we had a call center at the hospital. If someone called to ask a question, we would get data from them if they could give it to us, so that we could, in case if we had a follow-up to their question and needed to connect back with them, we would do so. And I could see this in a couple of your places where that might be good. Referral data is also good. How did you hear about us? And finding out who are these people, and then thanking the referral people. We were really good about doing that at the hospital when a doc or an ER referred people to us about going through that. The other thing is, when you're collecting data, if you have multiple people collecting data, I want to go to the last bullet there. And it's about avoiding common mistakes and having good data quality. Don't estimate data. Get either real data or do a better job of collecting it the next time. And then make sure your data is put into a format that you and others can interpret, and it doesn't lead to misinterpretation. We would say, make sure all your data is in the same language. So if you're tracking data that rounds off, then make sure everybody rounds off. If you're tracking data that has units, make sure everyone has the same units. One of the worst things you could do is track data, and then at the end of the month, you have to do a conversion of all the units on the data, because the grant asks for the data in a certain unit, and you have to convert it that way. So that would be super important for you to think about. Any questions about collecting or managing data? All right, so let's think about a data detox exercise. And this is something that you can do later on, or you can do with your own organization. And that's to go back and look at the data that you collect and say, and this is good if you get a group or a volunteers, or if you're by yourself, or if you want to process with me, I can help you with this as well. What is a metric that you currently track that your organization, for your organization, that isn't useful? Do any of you have those? You can throw that into the chat. I think from our food, we were doing food and nutrition, and we were trying to do weight management. We could probably think of some data that we would track that might not be useful. I'll give you one. If we're doing weight management and we're doing that through tracking food intake, a data point that might not be useful is price, the cost. You know what I'm saying? The cost of the food might be one of those that might not be, if you think of all the data, all the numerical things that you could track, that might not be one that would be kind of the most important one. And then went into data detox exercise, then recognize, so what's a new metric that would be better success? So let's say, going back to the food thing, that we know that fresh food probably has a higher cost than food that's not fresh, especially if you're talking about vegetables. So fresh vegetables cost more. And we found this out when I was working with school nutrition, is then what we found was the better metric wasn't cost, the better metric was waste. And we started measuring what was getting thrown away. We literally had volunteers that would sit there and help us to track like what was getting thrown away. So it wouldn't track everything on the plate, but let's say we served fresh carrots that day. And then they would see who took them. We could track how many people took the carrots, and then how often were the carrots thrown away as opposed to being eaten. So does that make sense a little bit? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down if that makes sense. Yeah, so that was a good way to look at that success. And then it helped us to manage our costs on the other end. And our program of encouraging, we were working with elementary kids here, encouraging them to eat the carrots by moving it to the front of the line, making having a lesson on carrots and how they grow and so on and so forth. So making data-driven decisions within your organization, and how can you turn the numbers into insights? And this is a little bit of a review that I've talked about, but it's really looking at trends using dashboards. Some people use dashboards. One of the things that I like to do is to spot trends, and the way you can spot trends is through using spreadsheets. That's a great way to spot trends. Because you can chart things and you can look for trend lines to see if things are going up, things are going down. And then you can look at it, look at different time segments. So you decide, is this something worth looking at month to month? Is this something like year to date? And does it give us a trend that every year? A lot of people do this with their annual giving and their fundraising, is they'll look at the amount of gifts that are giving each month, and then how does that add up at each quarter, and then how does that add up at the year end, and to see how are they going to use their social media and their events to guide more giving. more opportunities to give. So that's a really great place to do that. Identifying what's working and what's not. So if you see something that's really not working, you got the go, no go decision point at that time. And then adjusting programs that based on the data. Is this a program that's destined for growth? Is this something that we need to take a pause and step back on? Making data-driven decisions, how can you use data that you are currently collecting? I would say as you're building your next strategic planning, the data should drive the opportunity to decide what are the strategic priorities of the organizations. I always tell people, I have a lot of people that I go, tell me what you wish you had now for your nonprofit that you don't have today. And I get a lot of them tell me $50,000 or more money. And I said, I think I would venture to say if you took $50,000 more in today, with your current strategic plan, that you might end up with more problems than you do solutions. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? And I'll tell you why. That's a hard one, isn't it? So what I'm getting at is if you took in more money and you grew your organization out in the current strategic plan and structure your organization, you may have 50,000 more dollars, but are you given more time? Because time's a factor, right? And then you might add staff, which sounds good, but staff staff can eat a lot more of your project as well. Do you have space, physical space to handle whatever it is to grow the project? And so what I tell people is make plans that are designed to be able to grow and expand and scale when that opportunity comes and you feel good about that opportunity. You're ready to make that leap and that jump. Otherwise, that makes it really difficult. So take that data, impact your strategic planning. It should drive your program and evaluation and also be really useful with your grants and fundraising. So the storytelling with data is really important, and that's going to be important as you drive social media, your website, your grants, your fundraising, when you're presenting to others. And one of the things that you can say, like I give you the example, 85% of the clients improve job skills. I use a literacy program, and one of the stories that they were saying is that we gave away 1,000 books last year. And my question was, do we know if they read it? So if they didn't read it, I asked them, why did you give the books away? Because literacy means we're trying to improve their reading scores. And what we find is if we pick a data point, like we're trying to increase the students' reading scores from here to here, then we can use books and the volume of books, but really the frequency of the students reading within the volume of books as a data point that tells a better story. So really think about what that story is with your clients. How many of them are exhibiting joy? How many of them are finding comfort? Those things are super, super important. Let's see, that's a good point there. That the Alzheimer's Association has tons of data, so we use their data, and that's really good, because if you use national data to make a case for your local initiative, that gives you the best practices opportunity as you move forward, especially with disease nomenclature and things like that. Building a culture of data-driven leadership. From the leadership standpoint, you have to be about the data and make that part of your everyday decisions. So one of the things I used to do is I had a whiteboard, and on that whiteboard, I would track data on that whiteboard, so that when I sat down and had a team meeting or something like that with my staff, then I could go back to the data points and say, let's talk about this. Where is this driving us? Where is this going to get us to the next point? And sometimes this is really helpful with time, because then you can glean out the time wasters to say that's really not part of our data landscape. So at this point, we're not ready to do that yet, because we're trying to still move the needle on this one thing. It's also a great way to get buy-in from your staff, board, and volunteers. Most of you do end of year reports, which is awesome. But one of the things that's great is if you could do a report maybe each quarter that builds up to the end of the year, and then give an explanation as you're going along about data points and why they're on your radar, and then how pleased you are with some of the other data points. And then the final step is to start small and scale up. Pick 1, 2, or 3 things of data to track, build data into a habit, and then scale up from there. Because once you build the habit, my wife and I just recently decided to take a month and just write down what we eat and then how much calories are in it. And the funny deal is, it really had nothing to do with calories. It had more to do with building a habit of what was the food we should be preparing and what were the foods we should be avoiding. We never ate less. We just figured it out. So that's really something to kind of think about. So at the end, do you have any questions or anything like that? We're getting really kind of close to wrapping up and being done. But if you do, it's pretty easy to get a hold of me. If you just use the QR code right here, or you can go into, you can go and find me on, or email me. I'm more than happy to sit down and do a data analysis of your strategic plan. Just from a data standpoint, that stuff, that's free. Just ask me to do it. And that way I can get you guys in a really good place, and then we can move others into that same good place. So thank you for your attention. I think this is a great opportunity for me, and hope you follow me on LinkedIn and check out my website. I actually do have a leadership ebook on the website. So get a chance, all you got to do is sign up and you get a free ebook. So hope you can do that.